Hey guys, so we need to talk about parliamentary candidate selections and the way that process has been happening within Momentum. Um, so let's get started with a little bit of background. There's been a lot of upset over what's happened in Morecambe, and it appears that people within the left wing of the Labour Party and the organisation Momentum have been failing to ensure that we get idealistically driven, decent MPs to run for us in these areas. There was an article just recently about Morecambe in The Guardian, that was by Josh Halliday. I'm sure a lot of you read it. It's called Morecambe, Resort Town at the Heart of Dissent within Momentum. And it seems that the national Momentum and local Momentum groups effectively split and back different candidates there. Now, there was also another one titled within a day of that, by Jessica Elgett, titled Momentum Backed Labour Candidates to Contest Marginal Seats. And if you read that, it's got a lot of information about what's going on within the organisation, and it points out a lot of our failings as well. Moving on, I want to talk about the next parliamentary candidate selection race that's happening, and that's going to be on Saturday in Copeland, over in Cumbria, my neck of the woods. Now, the Momentum backed candidate there, backed by National Momentum, is a chap called Tony Lywood. The local Momentum group, the members themselves all seem to be backing a lady by the name of Rachel Holiday, who's been on the scene for quite a while. Now, I just want to tell you a little bit about Tony Lywood, because he added me on Facebook a few weeks ago. I hadn't taken any interest in the campaign for quite some time there, and so when he added me, I decided to Google him, see what I could find, as you do. It turns out he was privately educated at Blundell's School in Tiverton in Devon. I had a look at the price of that school. It's £24,000 a year currently. I don't know how he ended up there, what his background is, but I thought that's a bit of information that you should all have. He completed further studies at Leeds. I'm not exactly sure what, but the connection to Leeds is quite interesting. You'll notice that comes up quite a bit. He's a landowner with 6 buildings. And now, I'm not one to be jealous of somebody who's successful. I work in business. Last year I was running 6 companies and launched a 7th. And you know, that's all very well. But a couple of these buildings belonged to the council just a few years ago. And it's interesting how he now claims on his declaration of interests to own them himself. His declaration of interests can be easily found by googling his name, and on page 3 you'll see his list of properties. Now, I want to draw your attention to the properties on Banks Court. I believe those are the ones that used to be like toilet cottages in the centre of a beautiful town called Keswick. Now, this is a place full of money. Those are prime real estate, and they were sold by Allerdale Council, which Tony is on, to I need to get this correct. It claims in a newspaper article by the Times and Star dated the 20th of March, it doesn't give a year, that these were sold for £1 to Keswick Community Housing Trust. And Anthony, Mr. Lywood, in his declaration, admits that he's the chair of Keswick Community Asset Company. And I wonder, are those two the same company? Be interesting to find out. That aside though, he also ended up, again back to page 3, he ended up owning these properties according to his own declaration. So it'd be really nice to hear from Tony how those properties went from being under his stewardship as a councillor, being sold for the nominal sum of £1, and then being in his ownership as declared on his paperwork here in a very short period of time later. The properties were also developed using government funding that was specifically for put aside for developing housing under community trusts. And yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear about that. Now, the other thing that really upset me about Tony is he has £10,000 in shares in a company called N4 Pharmaceuticals. I'm not a big fan of the pharmaceutical industry. They do a lot of naughty things. So I googled them, and what I found was that their whole website is set up as a sales pitch to try and encourage people to buy their shares. So they're obviously a bad investment. They're usually, if a company is looking to sell a lot of shares and that's their focus, then they aren't able to get credit from elsewhere easily, because shares are the most expensive way to get credit to finance a company. So that's quite interesting. N4 Pharma, so on their patents page, they say, I'll read this out. N4 Pharma has acquired an exclusive option to file a range of draft patent applications prepared by Opal IP Limited for the purpose of reformulating certain existing drugs whose patents have already expired or are shortly to expire. N4 Pharma has the exclusive right to select and evaluate those draft patent applications in Opal IP's portfolio, which N4 Pharma believes to be the most commercially valuable. So that's interesting. So the sort of company that likes to squeeze the maximum out of your medicines. Yeah, not very ethical. It reminds me of Shkreli, the American who bumped up prices of drugs because he knew he could exert a lot of money out of people who desperately needed them. So yeah, I'm really disappointed that a Labour councillor would have shares in such an unethical company, and I certainly don't want to have MPs with fingers in those pies. It's difficult enough knowing that so many MPs are landlords. I think it's 134. How are we ever going to convince these people to regulate the industry which they leech so much out of? So that's a little bit about the things that are easily found on Anthony's declaration of interest. These are the things that he admits. However, there's a little more. Dig a little deeper, you find he's deleted a lot of old posts. He claims to be supporting Corbyn, claims to be the Momentum candidate, claims to be left wing, and then I find all of these. I'll read a few of them to you. He says he needs to go when referring to Corbyn, after one of his colleagues, who at least admits that she's on the right of the party, stated that the Labour Party is in meltdown as Corbyn loses no confidence motion. He says here, replying to Jean Andrew, I'm sorry, but he is unelectable. Far from being new and vibrant, he is he represents what we all have at different times in our life aspired to. For that I salute him. However, his dogma is still set in the 1970s, and if he stays, he will preside over yet another defeat in our party. So that's not the worst in the world. Yeah, but he's not really on board, is he? Then we move on. Maybe so we clearly started private health service. Maybe so we are political. And he started. Okay, Jean Andrews talking about the privatisation of the health service, and Anthony Lywood says maybe so. We clearly have political differences and we could debate all day. I'm afraid I cannot and will not support an unelectable leader. Barking in the wilderness is just that. Opinions without responsibility and dogma without power. Without getting elected we cannot do anything. We've done a lot without getting elected. We've forced so many U-turns, we've saved so many lives. Labour, you're doing a great job right now. It goes on. I want to get to. There's a number here. I'll just post them somewhere. But I want to get to the one that I found most upsetting. Anthony Lywood, he says, not you, Mick. It's like that Kafkaesque film, Rhinoceros, or The Night of the Living Dead. Everywhere I turn, the Corbynistas are there. The fact that he is principled should not blind you to the fact that he is a throwback to an age of class war. That has now gone. He maybe doesn't feel the class war, but I certainly do. In fact, it's the only reason I'm involved in politics. It's put an end to it to protect my little brothers and sisters and my neighbours and everybody else who suffers. I have not and will not support him or his bonkers, unworkable, radically left-wing policies, and that will bring nothing but ruin to the party. Nothing but ruin to the party. Hasn't he read like any book on economics since Keynes in 1945? Is he still stuck into Smith? 1760 odd, I think it was. Come on, man. Do some research. Call yourself a businessman. It claims he'll also ruin the country if he were ever to win an election, which is highly unlikely. He seems to think he's going to win now, doesn't he? Jumping on board. Then it goes on. This was really shocking. He's against nationalisation of the rail. I mean, that one's a no-brainer. He says, be careful what you wish for, Steve. Do you really remember what it was like in the 1970s? Corbyn's fighting the war of a bygone era. Yes, there is inequality and social injustices, and so much to do politically, but rich bashing and the reintroduction of nationalised industries is not the way forward, and Corbyn may actually split the party. I believe the party is splitting. Yeah, didn't work last time. Rich bashing. I suppose he's a little bit sensitive about that because he's rich. It's very nice. You know, I don't have any houses. You seem to have many. I'm gonna share a couple. You know, and to each according to the needs, from each according to their capabilities. Says yes, I agree, Steve. Steve doesn't agree with him. Steve Rossetti. Good on you, Steve. Yes, I agree with you, Steve. The wheels need to go in reverse, but not back to the radical left of the 1970s. We do not need more control on our banks. I'll correct that. We do need more control on our banks, so at least he's on side on one thing. We need more money for the NHS and education, and to lessen the disparity between the rich and the poor. That's all very good. What we don't need is renationalised railways and treating private industry as if it's the enemy. Private industries like N4 Pharma, which you're invested in, Tony, they are the enemy. They're not even developing new drugs. They're just gobbling up patents, tweaking the delivery system, and then stretching out another 8-year patent on them so that nobody can produce them. The idea of the patents in the pharmaceutical industry was that people who develop new drugs were able to extract a decent amount of profit from them, and then that people could freely develop them and put them on the market. That's why there's a limit on the patent. That's why they're not permanent. What your companies are doing is unfair. And it's costing people their lives. My dad, in fact, my father was suffering, and he was told that he wasn't allowed to get the drugs he needed that would save his life. And a brave nurse in Carlisle Hospital fought and demanded that he would get this treatment. In Scotland, this treatment was readily available, and it was all about cost. And I remember being terrified. This was only a few years ago, being terrified. And luckily that nurse, she stuck to her guns, and she demanded that he would be given those drugs. The director of the NHS region, or whatever it is, instructed the nurse that she hadn't to mention these drugs to anybody in the future, and that they wouldn't be prescribed again. So, yeah, companies like the one you're invested in, at killing people like my dad. Good, hard-working man. Right. So yeah, it goes on. There's a few more. I believe is unelectable. This is a funny one, so I'll read this out. But I'll just post the rest of them somewhere for you. Corbyn is like one of those Japanese World War II jungle fighters who fought on and will only come out of the undergrowth when their general arrives. Perhaps we should dig up Marx and get him to tell Corbyn that the old war is over and there are different fights to be had. These are not the old fights of class and capitalism, of Grunwicks and our winter of discontent, both of which I played an active part. He is the political equivalent of orange men, locked in a struggle that no longer exists, and his solutions are chimerical. Don't know what that is. I'd maybe learn if I got a 24 grand a year education. They can only exist in theoretical or abstract form. Corbyn is our conscience, but he should not be our leader. You know, it's not that his stuff is. I mean, it's quite creative that, but he's obviously not a terrible person. You know, Corbyn is our conscience, but he cannot be our leader. But it's completely wrong. Just completely wrong. He just doesn't get it. Didn't get it. You're probably wondering now how he ended up selected as the Momentum endorsed candidate for Copeland. Now, he's not the Momentum endorsed candidate as in Momentum, the organic organisation that got Jeremy Corbyn elected and that formed groups all over the country. No, that is a separate organisation to Momentum, the national organisation, Momentum Campaign Services, we could call it. What happened, from what I gather, is Richard Bergen's uncle Colin was friends with Tony, and they're both from the Leeds area, so it's the Old Boys Network, and he's been making phone calls and getting people to endorse him. For some strange reason, a unusual group from the NCG selected Tony without proper consultation with the local group. There was no hustings. There was no fair democratic process. Many in the Momentum, amongst the Momentum national staff and on the NCG, have said for a long time that Momentum isn't a political party and therefore doesn't need to be democratic. I think that's absolute bullshit. I want to see workplace democracy. I want to see democracy within my university. I certainly want to see democracy in lobbying organisations which want to have an influence over our political system. Momentum's going to have to learn this lesson really fast. It would have performed a hell of a lot better if it had embraced these ideas some time ago. So speaking to people who've endorsed him, they've all been, the ones I've spoken to and got an answer from, have admitted that they just trusted Colin Bergen, in fact, and his judgment on this. They didn't know anything about Tony Lywood's history or his companies or anything about these properties that he's ended up owning, which were owned by the council not long ago. And they didn't do the research properly. This definitely highlights that we need to create a robust and fair vetting process for Momentum if we're going to continue and if we're going to represent all those people in our organisation who need good representatives in Parliament. So sad times, but we've got till Saturday to get the word out. Like this, share it, get it around Copeland, let everybody see it. From now on, Cumbria, you lot from London, you don't even come fucking near it. Cumbria is my territory, yeah? And I don't want any of you interfering at all without coming through me first. And I'll check what you're doing. I'll vet your candidates. And I'll make sure that the guys over in Cumbria are getting something, are getting quality quality candidates and good decisions made for them, and I'll include them as much as I possibly can. It's absolutely disgraceful the way things have gone. Yeah, so it's the first time I've done this, a bit awkward. Never really recorded myself, feels weird. Like it, share it, tag your friends, tag, and let's make sure that in the next 4 to 5 days, everybody knows Copeland's been a complete catastrophe, and it's up to you guys in Copeland who you pick. I am really fond of Rachel Holiday. She's got the right ideals, and we could put a team around her who have all the expertise to make sure that together they're a force in Parliament. We can't rest on our laurels. We have to pick candidates who have the right ideologies, and the rest we can give them. We can give them training. We can give them support. We can give them secretarial staff. Yeah. So take a serious look at Rachel. I think she'll make a good candidate, and she's from the area as well. And I know how tribal you lot are. I was once asked if I would run in Copeland. I said no chance. I didn't play for the local rugby teams. All the best now. Goodbye.